What's up guys, TopTierYugioh here, and this is going to be my tournament report for the Fredericksburg, Virginia Regional. The regional was about 350 people, 9 rounds of Swiss, and I ended up going X2-3, 2 losses and 3 draws. I felt that the deck performed well, and if you're interested in the deck profile, I'll put the link to that on the screen. However, you'll hear in the report that I felt like I just made way too many mistakes with the deck, and it was also my first time ever playing it. And I felt that inexperience caused more misplays, which caused me to not do as well as I had liked. But again, I'm very happy with the deck itself. I also want to mention that I picked this deck up the night before and before the event. So like I was gonna play Metalfoes Cosmos again. That's something that I pretty much did all of my testing with. I picked up the entire deck, had everything ready for that deck, and was just like set on playing it. But then the night before when I'm testing with my team, I was just getting really bad hands. Like I just kept drawing the Fire King monsters again. Like I said in the deck profile, I kept drawing the Fire King monsters, and that shouldn't happen. And the way we tested was that like we had every meta deck. We had Metalfoes, ABCs, Blue Eyes, Burning Abyss, a hero deck, and DDDs. We're just kind of cycling through the decks and playing a match against each deck. And I'm playing Fire King Cosmos with Metalfoes, of course. And I think I lost to like every single deck. Like I was 0-5, and I was like, okay, this can't happen. I just keep drawing this Fire King monster. And it got to the point where I like shuffled the entire deck up, set it down, and was like, watch this. Top card was a Fire King Yaksha. The next card was a it's Fire King Yaksha, Fire King Garunix. Then it was a Fire King Island, and like 2 like good cards. It was like a tin can of like a Cosmojo. We played it out because I had the tin can of Cosmojo, which is kind of good. And then the next turn I drew Desires, and then I banished like 3 Cosmo Towns and drew into a Fire King Island after already having the 2 Fire King monsters in my hand. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this deck. I can't play it. But it's already like midnight at this point. And so I was like, well, since I was playing Metalfoes Fire King Cosmo, the closest thing is just to play a pure Metalfoes deck, but it's extremely different. Like you have totally different lines of plays and ways that to play the deck. Like in the Cosmo deck, I wasn't really worried about Anti-Spell because I have Cosmos. I also wasn't worried about Solemn Strike because I had Cosmos. But those are like huge relevant fears for this deck. And it was something that it was different for me to have to take into account. And so round 1, I played against Metalfoes. It was a mirror match. And in game 1, I was able just to summon a Jowgen and a Monolith and beat him down for a couple of turns really. And then as soon as he could get over the Jowgen, I had a counter to summon a Volflame, and then I had Emptiness to stop him from special summoning again, and I played Monolith Volflame beatdown. So game 1 was pretty bad for him because he just couldn't do anything. And then game 2, he goes Scout to make his play, searches his Monolith, plays a Volflame in the other scale. When he activates Volflame to destroy the Scout, I destroy it with a Ghost Ogre, so it doesn't resolve, and now he can't special summon anything except for Qli monsters. And he didn't have the other scale to really destroy it and then Pendulum summon. So I was able to beat him down for a couple of turns, and he just couldn't come back from that. Round 2 is against ABCs, and this was definitely one of the rounds that I should have won that I ended up tying. And so what happened was I was going first, and I obviously didn't open a very good hand. However, I did draw into another low scale with Desires. And so really all I could do was, the choice was either Pendulum summon the Jowgen to keep him from doing anything, so if he had Photon Thrasher he'd be kind of hurt, or to Pendulum summon the Monolith and try to beat him down and force him to make a play. And so what I did was I summoned the Monolith, and then after that I had the Cherries. But I remember I was in a position to where I was like, if he summons Buster Dragon, I could summon Jowgen and then out his Buster Dragon. Well, of course, as long as I can bait the first effect, which I felt like I probably could have. Or he's either gonna tag out, and I could still clear his whole board with the Jowgen. So it's like, if he summons Buster Dragon, I have an out. If he summons a bunch of rank 4s, I don't think I have the out to that. And so I wanted him to commit to making the Buster Dragon by making like a Tsukiyomi or something before I use the Cherries. Because if he just summons Gadget and then summons another monster and I play Cherries, then he probably just like castels this back, summons a Gear Gigant, and then just attacks for like 40-something hundred. Attacks for like 4,000. And so that was definitely a huge misplay on my behalf because he summons Gadget, summons a little ABC, and I should have cherried him right there, but I didn't. And so he summons the Buster Dragon, and then he's able to just sort of clear my whole board. On my next turn, I do draw into a way to set everything back up, and then I Cherries him afterwards. So he only had that one Buster Dragon that he summoned on his first turn. And then game 2, we went into time, and I was able to beat him down with like Orichalc, Breaksword, and Monolith. I also resolved the system down, so I was able to win that game after, again, a long grinding game. And it's like, when playing against ABCs, none of the games are like quick. It's just all grindy, because all their monsters float. I have all the counters to kind of make my monsters float as well. Like the only time it's a blowout is if I can summon like Cyber Dragon Infinity, like Jowgen, and like a whole bunch of other things. And even Jowgen's not that good in that matchup because they can just attack over it. It's really hard to have a quick game against ABCs unless they're just blowing me out. And so that ended up being a draw. But I definitely think that it could have been a win if I just resolved the Cherries correctly. So again, that's poor technical play. So then round 3 was against Majespecter. I don't remember exactly what I opened, but I do remember having the Cherries and the Monolith. And I definitely opened Monolith a lot earlier in the event. Like I think I opened this every game I did inside it out. So every game that it was in my main deck, I drew it turn 1. And so while it was good to beat people down, it's definitely not what you want to see in your opening hand. And then Cherries was pretty good because he was about to go into an Ignister at one point, and then I banished his Ignister, and then I just drew a Gold Driver and just beat him down with Gold Driver and Monolith. And then game 2 was the one where I was talking about earlier, where I resolved the Drowning Mirror Force. And so he plays Ties of the Brethren, summons all his monsters. I activate Drowning Mirror Force to spin them back to the deck, and afterwards I just beat him down. So round 4 was against ABCs again, and I feel like I opened an ideal hand, like exactly what I planned when making this deck. And so like I had the Cherries, the Maxx, and then some other stuff. And so I'm going second, and he summons the gadgets to summon an ABC monster. So I Maxx him, draw a card. He goes into Tsukuyomi, I draw another card. And then when he activates the effect, I chain Cherries and banish all his Buster Dragons. So he's already committed to his normal summon. He's already like discarded a bunch of monsters to his graveyard, so he really can't have that much left. And then I have this to answer a Solemn Strike. And then I still had like the Unicorn that I searched off of this, and other cards that I drew off the Desires and for my own turn. And I just overwhelmed him from there. And then game 2, he had Anti-Spell Fragrance, and I didn't draw MST, Cyclone, or Twin Twisters. And so I just literally couldn't do anything. Like I opened the hand of all Metalfoes, and he just flips Anti-Spell. So that was a quick game. So then game 3, I'm going first. And I remember I opened up Jowgen, Cherries, Monolith, MST, and something else that I can't remember. It was probably a Metalfoes scale or something. But what ended up happening was, I summoned the Jowgen, so he can't special summon, so no Thrasher, whatever gadget he summons to attack over is dead. So it's definitely already going to slow him down. And then I had the Cherries in hand too, so I had a play to slow him down, and then a play to kind of banish all of his Buster Dragons. And that happened as planned. Like I definitely played the Cherries, banished all his Buster Dragons. He wasted a gadget summon to attack over this. But the main mistake that I made was I had set this MST so I could hit the Union Hanger. So the idea was like banish his Cherries, hit the Union Hanger. I mean, not banish his Cherries, but banish his Buster Dragons, hit the Union Hanger, and then be able to follow up with a pretty big Pendulum summon on the next turn. Because I think, yeah, that 5th card had to have been a Metalfoes monster. And so, but what ended up happening instead was he had Twin Twisters. He destroyed the set MST that I was saving for the Union Hanger before attacking over the Jowgen. And so then on my next turn, he's able to flip Anti-Spell, and I couldn't play after that. So I had the MST, I had the way to answer the Anti-Spell, but I set it to destroy the Union Hanger instead of holding it for the Anti-Spell. And so my mistake in that game was failing to realize that I didn't quite need MST to hit Union Hanger in that case. After I resolved the Cherries to banish his Buster Dragon, the only thing I should have been worrying about was Anti-Spell with the MST. And so I think that just comes with a lack of experience from playing Pendulums, and that if you have MST, hold it for the Anti-Spell. Like, it's either Anti-Spell or a Solemn Strike. You don't need to worry about anything else, like as far as traps. And that was my biggest mistake in that game, and I definitely feel like it was winnable. Like, I cherried him, I had the Metalfoes monsters in my hand to make plays, and then I had a Jowgen. Well, he destroyed it, but I still had it. And then I had the lucky Monolith that I kept drawing too. Like, I felt like I definitely should have won that game, but that misplay cost me the game, and possibly the rest of the event, because I already had one tie, so this gave me a tie and a loss. So round 5 was against Metalfoes, and at some point he sets a combination with his with one of his Metalfoes scales. And then later on he sets another back row. Oop, that's the wrong sleeve. And then later on he sets another back row that I don't know what it is. And so we're grinding it out, just grinding. And we get to a point where I have like the Infinity play, I have Unicorn, and set Pendulum skills. So I can make a huge Pendulum summon and just win that turn. However, I need to know what these back row are. Like, is this Solemn Strike? I'm not sure. And so I asked him, I was like, are any of these cards public knowledge? Do I know what either of these are? And he's like, he looks at it and he's like, nope, you don't know what this is. They're both unknowns. Even though it was really only one unknown. And so what happens was, I'm trying to make the safe play. And so instead of Pendulum summoning, I just summon Grampulse. It has a good defense. I set a counter, and then I hit one of the unknowns. And I think I didn't hit the combination though. I hit the other card, which actually was a Solemn Strike. And so I'm like, okay, I made the correct decision not to Pendulum summon. I hit the Solemn Strike. But I still don't know what this other one is, so I'm like, this could also be a Solemn, it could be anything. And so I'm thinking I have Grampulse, I have Counter, I have a really good defensive setup right now. And so then on his next turn, he goes and he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, but this was a combination that I set earlier in the game. And then he destroys it with the Metalfoes scale and like goes off. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you mean you forgot to tell me? Like, you looked at it and told me that it was unknown. So I immediately call a judge over. The judge says that he can't really verify what was said. So he can't verify whether he told me that it was known or not. And so that he can only really go off the plays that were actually made. And the play that was made was, I didn't Pendulum summon, and then he flips a combination and goes off. Because if I had known that other card is a counter, I'd definitely Pendulum summon like Cyber Infinity, Unicorn, and just blow him out from there. Because he didn't have like a strong board, he just had like an Adamante in attack mode. So it's like I legit could have won that turn. And so the other bad thing about that was we also didn't get a time extension. And so that was like a couple minutes wasted. So after a long grind game, wasting time with a judge cost us a little bit of time, and we ended up going into time game 2, which was the easy win for me. So I just summoned like Breaksword, Adamante, and an Orichalc. And so I hit Breaksword. So I used Breaksword to destroy the Orichalc, hit 2 of his back row, and then just push for game through that. And so it was super easy to win, but it was just like if I had won game 1 like I should have, it would have been a 2-0 instead of a tie. Round 6 was against Blue Eyes, and I had the Cherries. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I had Cherries, but he ended his board with set Emptiness, set Wind Blast, and an alternative dragon. Oh, and a Sage. And so because he had Emptiness, I couldn't Pendulum summon, so I set both my scales, couldn't Pendulum summon. I tried to normal summon to attack over the Sage, and he activated the Wind Blast to put it back on top of my deck. Oh, and he chained them, actually. He chained them so the Emptiness wasn't destroyed, and it was just way too much for me to handle at that time. And so it set me back a turn, and then he just OTK'd me the next turn. And then game 2, I had Jowgen, Void Ogre, and Counter, and I'm like, okay, I definitely win this game. There's no way I lose. But then he activates Twin Twister, targeting my back row, and then he discards the Fabled Catsith, and I'm like, never mind, I definitely lose this game, right? So now, of course, I have to negate it, and then he destroys the Jowgen. Then he Raigekis my whole board, so I just kind of lose everything. But then he didn't have enough to follow up on his turn, so I was able to kind of grind out a win. And then game 3, he didn't really have much, but he had Anti-Spell, and not the Cosmic Cyclone to out him. And then I just beat him down with normal monsters. Round 7 was against a subscriber of mine. He actually has his own channel called What the Blah Gaming. They actually stream feature matches at the event. Now I'll give you the link to his channel and the feature matches somewhere on the screen or something. He was playing PK Fire. And it was funny because I sat next to him in the last round. He was saying how he was watching my PK Fire videos beforehand, and I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. So it was funny to think that we ended up playing each other too. And so game 1, I think I went first. I forget who goes first, but I didn't have a really good hand. And he had an awesome hand. Like he had Terratop, Tour Guide, all this stuff. So he summons like a Beatrice, a Dante, and he set Vanity's Emptiness and Fogblade. And so he was able to stop me from really making too many plays. And he got me down to 300 life points. And I finally outed the Vanities, and I'm able to summon a Cyber Dragon Infinity and a Breaksword. And so I remember he made an F-Zero too. I took his F-Zero with Cyber Dragon Infinity, then I used Breaksword to destroy an Orichalc and Beatrice. Then I negated Beatrice, and then used Orichalc to destroy one of his other monsters, or back row or something. It's like a Solemn Strike. And I ended up getting him down to pretty low life points as well. But then on his next turn, he's like, special summon another Terratop. And I'm like, okay, not gonna negate that. And then he's like, normal summon Barbar. And I snapped my head so fast to look at the life points. I only had 300 left, so I'm like, okay, I have to negate that. But then afterwards, he just uses the Fogblade to revive a Phantom Knight monster. Goes into Nightmare Shark and attacks for game. So game 1 was a lot of fun, but game 2 was not as much fun. And so I think I went first game 2, and I opened up really, really bad, like something like this. And this probably would have been better going second. I wanted to go first because I know he plays Solemn Strike, another back row, and Beatrice. So it's like, I don't want to go second against any of that. I just want to go first and set up my board and then have the answers. However, I drew all of the answers and none of my own engine. And so all I could really do was like pass turn, and he's like, okay. Summon Terratop, and I'm like Flying Sea. He's like, normal summon Alec or something, or Farfa to get rid of it. Then I'm like, Cherries. And then he just beats me down for the rest of the game with a Breaksword and a Leviair. Because I just didn't draw any answers, and I had the Gameciel, and I'm like, if I tribute over any of his monsters, it gives him a stronger monster. And so this game was just really bad. Like, I just bricked really hard. And that's unfortunate, but it's gonna happen. So at this point, I have like two ties and 2 losses, and I'm like, goodbye chances of topping or getting an invite or anything. So I was not happy at this point. Round 7, I played against Minerva Turbo, and game 1, I opened up Cherries, and he's making an Infinity play, and I actually ended up banishing his Cyber Dragon Infinity, and that slowed him down for a bit. But then he also had like a Soul Charge and a whole bunch of other plays to make, and so he ended up grinding that game out. But Cherries was good in that game, just like having it was good. Because if he had an Infinity, I would have probably auto-lost to his board, but instead I was actually able to play it out, despite losing anyways. And then in game 2, I opened something like this, I remember. And I think 2 other Metalfoes scales. And again, Jowgen had the same problem that it had in any matchup that wasn't Blue Eyes, and that its stats are just way too low. So I felt like if I had ever summoned it, he could just normal summon anything and attack over it, and it doesn't do anything. But I ended up winning the game regardless. He had an anti-spell, but I was able to MST it, and I won that game. But then, because we went into time during that game, and he had already won game 1, it was another draw. So that was my 3rd tie of the day. And then for the final round, I played against Infernoids. And so this game was pretty standard for a Metalfoes deck. Like, my opponent goes off and he does some stuff. I summon Jowgen to clear his board. He had like a Deviati, Onunku, and Tierra. Yeah, he summoned all of that in one turn. And I like bait the Onunku effect, summon Jowgen, and then clear his board. Then destroy the Jowgen with a Metalfoes card, and Pendulum 5 and win. So that was sort of the gist of that. And then in game 2, he goes off again, but then I have Drowning Mirror Force to sort of answer his board. And then I had a Gofu to make a big play, and then I summoned a Crystal Wing, and he just couldn't get over the Crystal Wing. And then once again, another big Pendulum summon ends the game. And so overall, I'm really happy with the deck in general. I felt like the deck performed really well. I never really bricked badly to the point where I couldn't play except for round 7 against PK Fire. And against, against my first tie against ABCs, I could have used Cherries to probably win that match. I shouldn't have tied against the second Metalfoes player, so that also could have been a win. I also misplayed against the second ABCs and setting the MSD instead of holding it for an anti-spell. So I misplayed a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, honestly. And I think that just comes from it being my first time playing the deck. Like my first time ever picking up a Metalfoes deck and playing it. Actually, I think it's my first time playing Pendulums in general, because I didn't play Pepe when that came out either. So this is like legit my first time playing Pendulums. And I felt like that inexperience definitely showed. So it's just those misplays that really cost me the event, I think. So I think I'll actually stick with Metalfoes leading into the Invasion Vengeance format, because I do have a lot of fun playing it. It was fun even though I was like learning as I went. It's definitely something that I can see myself playing in the future. And one more thing that I'd like to mention is the importance of preparation. And so like for me, I switched decks the night before, and that was obviously a very bad decision because I didn't know how to play this deck. I didn't know how to play against other decks with this deck. And then also I was getting cards at the event. Like I was in line for registration, and I'm trying to get like my last side cards. Trying to figure out like my ratios while I'm in the line to register and turn in my deck list. So it's like I'm in line filling out my registration. I've got other guys going around picking cards up for me. Other people are filling out my deck list. Like it was bad. It was all over the place. And you really never want to be in a situation like that. Like I was lucky and got everything down and turned everything in on time, but I easily could have not done that and then ended up playing a subpar deck. I also didn't eat a very good breakfast. Like I think all I ate all day was like some energy bars, and it just wasn't sufficient. Like I felt hungry, especially in the later rounds, irritable. I just had like these Luna bars, and they have a pretty good amount of protein, like 8 grams of protein, not that much sugar, and they even have like inspirational quotes on the back, like "This day leads the awesome," or "Do something today your future self will thank you for it." And these were kind of like keeping my head up through the event. Alright guys, thanks for watching. This has been my tournament report from Fredericksburg. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.